All right, we're going to get into our second half here. I have some hot button topics. And as responders, we've all seen these things on stage. We've all racked our brains for the very best way to put it into a response so that the organization takes it the best way, the director takes it the best way, the actors don't walk away insulted. So our first sticky wicket for our panelists. How should we address age discrepancies between the actor and the character? I have seen a show where the mother character was younger than the daughter character. Those types of things. As a responder, how do I avoid the pitfalls? I want to start with the panelists. No pressure, panelists. and then we'll just open it up as we have been. So
we're like, I don't know.
Welcome to our world. Okay. Help us out. Help us out.
I think I might start in the realm of making a suggestion of makeup to help. I, as an actor, used to have to play a character that ranged in age from like 20s to 70, and I was in my 20s. It wasn't hard to age. It was really hard to age me at that time, but you can do it. And I'm going to use the Golden Girls as a really good example of this. Sophia, Estelle Getty was only like, 3 years older or something like that than B. Arthur. You would have never guessed it on that show. Now, granted, I know that's professional TV, but makeup can still do a lot of wonders. So maybe I just might make that suggestion as a way to get into it.
Physicality too.
Yeah.
Getty was much more personally mobile.
Yes.
She appeared to be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think I would start with deciding if I want to address it at all based on whether it actually matters to the play. If they do a good job and it reads, like, we all know that we mostly dance with the person that brought us, right? Like, if we don't get the right age groups to audition, and we have capable actors come, I think it's actually an insult to those actors to go out looking for somebody else, unless the role is like necessitates that. And then if you still can't find it, there's a reason. You have to be really sensitive to that. We're not equity. We're not pulling from different cities. We get who we have, and I think that it's not the actor's fault, for one. Like, they didn't choose that. The director, it's you could make it a suggestion in the directorial choices, things like that. But I would be very hesitant to bring that up. I also would be hesitant to bring up physicality, like weight, or those kinds of things. Like, those are the actors that we have, and the director thought it was adequate. And as long as it worked for that production, I don't know that it's necessary to even talk about.
I agree with you, Dan. I make a great point too of, unless you've sat on the other side of the table, right? As a director, as a producer, as a production staff, like, when you send out an audition notice, you get what you get.
Yep.
And you have to make do with, I don't want to say make do, that's terrible kind of say. You have to, like, casting is like a puzzle, and you're fitting pieces in. And if those pieces happen to be those pieces, you make it work, right? So I don't know that I would mention an age discrepancy either.
I have a curiosity. I mean, I feel like there are tips that you could give for how they could portray the age differently. So you started on makeup, you started to get into their characterization for a physical aspect. So I would give the whole, maybe try walking with arched back, more of an arched back, change your, you know what I mean, to give you the appearance that you are younger or older, whatever it is that you're doing. Yes. The way you deliver lines, your dialect that you're choosing to utilize, those are always that can age you. And so I would just go to theatrical ways of aging and use it rather than coming out and saying, you should have cast an old person. That's not really what is. Right. We wouldn't say that. We would say, I loved this really worked when you carried yourself this way, it made you seem older, or this did not work because as an able-bodied person, you made it seem like you were in your 30s and not in your 90s. You know what I mean? So I would consider what they can have control over and address those.
I just to jump off this, I wonder if your response would change if, let's tweak it just a little bit, if the 20-year-old ingenue kind of character being played by a 40-year-old who carries themselves on stage like a 40-year-old. Does that change your, you get who you get, I get that.
Yeah.
But does that then,
Although realistically, we're not really struggling to find 20-year-old
Yeah.
actors,
When you
right?
look across the chorus and you see.
So if
yeah,
you make
two
it, but
candidates.
then that becomes like a director's choice, but that's still not the actor's problem. But I think to your point, you can talk about how you can like make acting choices or physicality choices to portray an age that isn't the same as you, and acknowledge that without saying it was the wrong choice to be that.
Right.
Yes.
This was chosen as a hot button topic because when specifically when the older female is playing a younger female or playing a character that we see an age of ranges in a specific show, to read the feedback that perhaps that actress was too old for a role is devastating. And I've seen it in the last 5 years. I have examples of it. And that's why I want to discuss it. I want to say, like, what is the best way to do it? What are we hearing? Maybe we don't talk about it because they cast who they were cast. But maybe we're also saying, very specifically, the makeup, the walking with a little bit of encumbrance, these types of things. And I think that's helpful. Fred?
From a response perspective, years ago, Center Stage did Charlie Brown Christmas. And we had a more mature female playing Lucy, and we had a high school boy playing Schroeder. And we did get in the response that it was creepy. That we took some offense at that because, we're talking demons.
Yeah.
We do have also as a cautionary tale to our groups in the room, we do have one group in our organization that had a lot of problems because they initially cast a teenager as Rocky in Rocky Horror, and it became a thing. So as a cautionary tale, I could just encourage everyone to be sensitive from a group perspective of that as well.
Another thing too is if they pull it off, tell them you pulled it off.
Yeah.
That because like back to what I said before about think about what's the thing that is worrying that person the most. I was in a production where I was cast as Arnie Stoller's wife. Now Arnie Stoller's youngest child is older than me, and we did the whole thing. But like from the beginning, when we were offered the roles, we were together when we were offered the roles, and we're like, how are we going to pull this off? All right, we'll try it. And so it was literally at the top of our mind through the entire 2 months of rehearsals. How can we pull this off? And then when we got the reviews, and a lot of them were like, and both of us are fairly well-known names in the community, so so it was a little bit of a buzz when that happened. And the reviews came out. I didn't ever think you were going to pull it off, but it went all right. It was okay. I did, I giggled for a little while and then I was fine. And, and honestly, the biggest challenge ended up being that I'm so much taller than his wife. He didn't know how to put his arm around me.
Jim?
Two quick anecdotes of this from personal experience. I was taking acting classes as a teenager, and I was in the teen class. He had a children's class and an adult class. So the adult class was going to be doing an evening of scenes from Tennessee Williams plays. They needed one more actor, so they asked me could I do a scene in the adult class. I said fine. Yeah. So they cast me as the grandfather in 90 Day One. So that was just weird. Anyway, but the other one is the only time that I have had a critique sent back to me saying, could you change the way that you phrase this, was in a production of A Lion in Winter, where Philip of France, who was supposed to be late teens, early 20s, was played by an actor in his 40s and made no particular effort to seem younger. And I made a response to that, which I didn't think was a very negative response, but they still asked me to change it, so I softened it some. So I had to deal with that issue. So I said, I'm going to be very careful how I tread from here on, but if something needs to be pointed out, I will still do so, but gently.
Thank you. Megan?
I agree with Dan. I think sometimes it's just not worth it unless it's like
a major thing that really bothered you? I got a critique one time, and I was like, oh, thank God they went after me on that and not the actor. Because, like, you've got people, they're people, you know? We've got people with all kinds of stuff, going through all kinds of stuff, and I mean, I always kind of like brace myself a little bit, just a smidge, not as much as I used to have to, but I just brace myself because I'm like, please don't say anything to some of these people who maybe are struggling. I mean, I was, you know, it's just we've got people with body issues, we've got people who have age issues, we've got people that, you know, we don't know their story and everything, and sometimes like just as a director sitting on the production team, I know those things, and I'm just a little bit more like protective of them over that. And so I think sometimes if you get like something sent back and you're like, well, why would that get sent back? That was under this or that. And you're like, the crew knows who's on the team. They know these actors, they know this, that, or the other. And again, I just think sometimes it's not worth it. But like you guys said, like sometimes that's who they get. You know, that's who they got. That's this, that, or the other. Maybe someone dropped them up beforehand, and then they just had to grab somebody. I mean,
Yep.
you know, that happens. So.
Yes, Olivia.
Hi, so I'm very new, and I'm sure you already know this, but I just, as somebody who in my real life job does a lot with minors and children, I would say be wary of when there are older women with younger men or older men with younger women, and I know you know that, but like I could see myself making, like, I'm still creeped out by Back to the Future, like sleeping in the aeronaut the other day. It was creepy. By like the second song, when the mom is like in love with the son, there's a moment where you're like, it's creepy. It's supposed to be creepy, but it's weird and creepy. And ultimately, I just want our younger actors who are 18 and under, and even those whose brain hasn't developed until they're 25, because I know that, to pay attention to them being safe and making sure that, because even though it's on stage, they're learning something from that. So I just want to name that, because if it is called out, then it just, I don't want anybody to have that reflect back on them. And I feel like you all probably all know this. I'm just an overprotective mama of younger kids.
I appreciate that perspective, and also all the educators. Yes.
So I have my own personal experience as an actor, starting with John.
It's not my fault.
It is. I was 42 years old and cast as a teenager, and it worried me, you know, like I kept telling them, but I'm 42 to be in Little Shop of Horrors. And I was concerned about the adjudicator, what they're gonna say. You know, I had to learn how to carry myself like, you know, some cool girl. But, you know, everybody was kind. And again, you mentioned that kindness. That was very important to me as an actor. I would have been mortified if they would, what, they had that old lady on the stage with these young girls. And then 16 years later, this person cast me in a show to be an old person. So, you know, again, people were kind, but that's very important in how you come at somebody, because I was a little intimidated to play different age groups, but not be the correct age.
But you did a great job.
Oh, yes.
I had an instance at one point where I had no guys audition for a college age kid role. And there was a girl who auditioned who I really liked. I really wanted to be her. And I was like, okay, would you be able to, if the rights were allowing it? She agreed to. And when she was on stage, she didn't make me believe that she was a man. So I was able to work with her and say, like, you know, watch your brothers, how they sit, how they walk around, how they do this, how they do that. You know, we can change your image. And we ended up pulling it off to where once she came off the stage and she had the ball cap off and all this kind of stuff, people had no idea she was even in the show, because she had changed the way she moved around and things that she did, as far as even just simply sitting in a chair or eating food, you know. But there are ways around that. One thing I do want to ask is costuming and body styles.
That's our next sticky wicket, everybody. Yes, costuming design, the reading of the silhouettes of the era, drawing or painting them up if your costume designer does sorts of rendering, versus trying to costume real people with real bodies and seeing someone on stage who you go, man, that performer's so talented, but I'm not sure that what they're wearing is conducive to their character or like who they are as a person. And to use the word unflattering and not sound like an ass, how do you do that? How do you address those issues? Can you address those issues?
I responded to a show where one of the characters was in pants that were way too tight and were uncomfortably too tight. And they looked uncomfortable to him. I was uncomfortable looking at him. It wasn't appropriate to the era. It was bad on so many levels. Please, for the love of God, put people in clothes that fit them. And I think I described it as looking uncomfortable.
I think that's a great wording. John, yeah.
If I see, I have a go-to word or phrase, if I see something that doesn't work for me in this role at this time, that's what I say. It didn't work for me because of this or that. I don't say it's wrong. I just say, in context, it really did not work. And give the reason why, whether it was that period or just wasn't flattering for the person. I try to stay away from that one, but sometimes you're going to get to that one. So it's not, nothing is ever, in critiques, nothing is ever wrong. It's a question of whether it works with what you're trying to accomplish. You know, it might work very well for something else, but for this, it just doesn't work for me. And that's the thing. It's not that I'm saying it doesn't work. I'm saying it doesn't work for me. And that way, you're not really coming down on people.
In this particular instance.
Correct.
Yeah, I think costumes in particular, like that's not a thing that I know a lot about. But I have a lot of resources of people in my life that do know a lot about it. And we also have Google and a lot of research opportunity to find out if that actually matters. I go back again to like, is that even necessary to bring up? You know, are there other things I can talk about with the costumes that don't necessarily address this person's body shape or the choice made to accommodate this one person? And I really, like, everyone knows Deanne. Deanne's a great costumer, has been costuming for years. I will almost always ask Deanne, bounce my thoughts off of her before I write a costume critique. Just to make sure that I'm not just being polite, because I sometimes can be blunt, but accurate and right, and whether it even matters. So I think that we should use our resources for those kinds of things and not just type it up in the middle of the night and just send it off without really like thinking about how it might impact people.
I learned a lot about fashion nerds doing that because I'll look
Yeah,
up, that looked weird to me, that caught my eye. And then I look it up, I'm like, oh, it's appropriate, cool.
Yeah.
And then I'll write that in the critique. I'm like, this thing caught my eye, but then I found out it was completely accurate. Nice job.
Yeah.
Karen?
So, one of the things that I've always done is kind of I notice and I wonder, and I do comments. And so I just recently did a critique in which I said, I noticed that the actor was fumbling a lot with their shirt. And I wonder if maybe, that could have been addressed a little bit to fix the shirt so that they would have been more comfortable with not having to pull it down all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seemed like they weren't comfortable exposing their midriff or whatever it was. So more of like, could you have fixed the garment, almost like blaming the garment of saying, put a button here. I think a button would have helped a lot for the actors to not have to fiddle with the garment. Because we all know too, like if the garment doesn't fit us, we kind of move around in it and something. So I tend to kind of comment more on not that it didn't fit well or anything else, just that they seem to be pulling your pants up or they seem to be something along those lines.
That's great. I was gonna say, Linda, as a costumer, do you have some suggestions for us?
Oh, yeah. You know, as a costumer, sometimes it's hard to find what you're looking for in the budget that you have to work with. Okay, number one. Number two, we all know the divas.
The
And no matter
divas, is that what
you
you
put
said?
in, they're not happy with it. And they go, well, I want to wear this, I want to wear this. Here's a photo of different costumes from that period. As long as you stick in this, I don't care what you wear, but I'm gonna look at it and make sure that the length is right, that everything's okay. You have to feel comfortable in what you're wearing, because that translates into what happens here. And I always say, are you okay with it? Does this look okay? And for those people who are adamant that they're going to wear what they're gonna wear, I go, okay, you can wear it. And then I take myself out of that particular costume as long as it stays within that period, that frame. When you're doing period pieces, you're only looking places that you can find the dress. Comments about trousers. Did women wear trousers in the 20s and 30s and 40s? Yes, they did. And there was a comment from an adjudicator said, oh, she was in trousers. And I went, wait a minute, go back here and look. Because I have photos of all kinds. I have books, stacks of books, different eras. And I know what needs to go on stage. Can't always find what I'm looking for. But that is a costumer, at that point in time, you have to just kind of go, this is what I came up with, this is the best I can do, because I've got a $200 budget and I've got 10 actors to costume. If I can't find it locally, and you know, really, really nice about this is community theater, they are out there. You know, you put out there, hey, I need this, has anybody got it? One time I got something from Middletown. She was on her list and she thought, she goes, I got that and it's a size 50 and yes, you can borrow it. Okay, so those comments about that, and I made a comment about a show where the time period, the girl had on a skirt that was so short, and she's supposed to be a business professional in a setting that it didn't need to be that short. First of all, it was not the time period. You could have seen her breakfast and she moved her legs a certain way.
Use that in the critique.
And she didn't know how to wear it. I don't know if that was her personal stuff, but you know, and it was not thankfully a show that I costumed, but I did comment on it because in a business setting, in that particular business, she would never have had on a skirt that short for that time period. It just wasn't done. So that's, you know, that's one thing about costuming is you can look at it and you go, okay, you pulled it off okay, but you know, but there are times when you go, no, where was the costumer? Why did she not look at that? When she sat down, why didn't she look at where that skirt was coming on that girl? You know, so there, as a costumer standpoint, you do what you can. It's just like casting a show. What you can pull together to make it work is what you got to do.
Thank you, Linda. Laureen?
Sometimes don't be afraid to tell them it wasn't right. Because I have said before when I've gotten critiques and I've been the director and I've told an actor, do not do that. That is over the top, it doesn't fit with this character. And the responder says, you know, that person would have, and I go. It's almost like I know what I'm talking about. So let's be kind, but don't be afraid to say, for whatever reason, that particular costume does not fit the period. Or, you know, I don't know your resources, you know, I've used that before, I don't know what your resources are, but that person's pants that he was wearing were way too long for him. Maybe you didn't have the time to hem them up, but it would have been more appropriate had they been hemmed And if it were period, you can pull it in this way, now you're cut. Okay, so sometimes it is lack of knowledge. Sometimes it is personality. Okay, and sometimes it's someone going, I'm doing it my way, but you don't know what you're doing. And then believe you me, that there are times when responses in adjudications when they were in the past, you could look at them and point at them and say, you know, now, next time you have this situation, not just my advice, but somebody else's an educated audience member. Okay?
It goes back to, you can tell people when something's not working, but it's important how you tell them it's not working. That's this whole process. That's the one thing I try to keep in my mind all these many years.
I'm just gonna tag on, if you are questioning something, sometimes it is better left unsaid, or choose a way to frame it in what did work. So if the pants were super tight, it might have been not because of, it might be because it was leather, chosen suede, or maybe you could, or depending on, so maybe putting out and saying, there were a lot of things that I think did work really well. I love how you chose this texture or this, and I think not focusing on fit. Sometimes we focus so much on fit because we relate to it. But if you start thinking about how this costume fits with other areas, like how does it fit with the set design, with the colors used on stage, with the lighting, with the other costumes that they're standing next to, you can get away from having to make comments about personal specific costumes and still provide positive feedback or critical feedback in a way that you could say, okay, maybe that pants did not fit, but let me see, I didn't like the color. Maybe it was a color choice because it didn't go well with the lighting that was chosen in that scene, or vice versa, you know what I mean? So there might be creative ways you can think about framing it.
Well, there's also the possibility that it is purposely to help the character.
Yes.
So like in Matilda, the father, his clothes were too tight, but he was a person who was delusionally trying to do with glory days, so it would make sense that he would maybe be wearing clothes that he really shouldn't be wearing anymore. And because I remember noticing that when I wrote that one up and calling it out for that reason, like, oh, nice touch that this person's clothes never fit. They were.
And it's funny that you say that, because our intention was hopefully in one scene to get him to bend over and it ripped. And we couldn't figure out how to do that and fix it every night. So that's really interesting that you would call something like that out.
There you go.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. Like, we just were like, is this worth it for us to make it that way, or is it just a conversation piece that, you know, but there are other things you can address.
Any other comments on costume? Okay, one last issue here before we wrap up. With a lot of groups doing cabaret type shows, with a lot of the music that we use and perhaps characterizations that we borrow, wanted to ask the panel how responders should go about addressing concerns over intellectual rights. And or did we pay for these things that we're now presenting on stage? How can I put that in my response as a concern of the community?
I don't think that that's really our problem. Like, every pre-show has 20 songs that we don't own.
Hold on. Ask Happy Am I
Well,
gives us the rights to play.
I'm just, so
There
are,
of dramatic action.
I think that there are delineate, well, first of all, I don't know that it's a responder's responsibility to address it.
Legality.
Yeah, so if somebody has a real problem with it, they can bring it up to the production house, in my opinion.
Fred?
I recently had to deal with that situation. The way I handled it is I said, I had a comment and I said, I can only imagine the hoops you had to jump through to get the rights for all of these things.
That's what I said.
And then I said, it has limited information in the program. You may want to print more of the legal documentation in the program, or at least hold on to it in case you're ever asked about it.
I mean, to me, I'm going to agree with Fred. It is not our responsibility as a responder to police that. But as a person who creates their own content and creates their own things, I want to make it clear that that's my intellectual property. So if somebody is using my intellectual property without asking me, that would be upsetting to me.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a Disney song in a show, okay? I don't know what you have to go through to acquire those rights, because I don't do musicals. I don't know anything about it. And I do know that people have gotten in trouble for that.
Sure.
And so I want to at least say to the, I hope that you did get all the rights to this, because I don't want you to get in trouble. I don't want that to happen to anybody either. So, again, there's a fine line. And again, I think, well, like John said, it's how you say those things to someone rather than saying, oh, you did this and it was wrong and you shouldn't have done that. So.
Linda?
And just to tag on, yes, it's not that we're policing them, but maybe they think that ASCAP covers everything, which it doesn't. And especially if it's used within the context of the show. And at that point, you go, kudos to the producer or whoever had to acquire these rights that you used in this show. That's the only thing we can do, is just, that makes them aware that ASCAP doesn't cover everything. There are guidelines.
John?
What Fred said and what Linda said, I think is important, because ACT is an organization made up of 19 members who own ACT. If one of those members are out there doing something like that and we don't acknowledge that, oh, we don't know, kudos for you, whatever, kind of keeps it from being in our lap. Just acknowledge that, gee, good to get those rights and good for you, because it can affect us in the long run if it keeps on going. So
I like your approach of using it as a critique of the program. Make sure you list the stuff out in the program.
Yeah.
I think the expectation is everybody is doing it correctly.
Correct.
We spend a lot of money every year to get rights for these things so that Jason can do his magic. And totally agree with what you're saying, but that's not I don't think that is a responder's obligation. If you look at it and say, ACT should look at this and say, hey, if somebody brings something up, that would go to a level above
That is my point. I want to be clear, I'm not advocating for stealing intellectual property. Just like, for example, I directed the Crucible, and I literally personally contacted Metallica and Apocalyptica to get rights to use their music within the show, which is not part of the protections. But it wasn't also listed in the program, and I'm not sure that, I had the documentation, but I'm not sure that it's the responder's responsibility, is what I'm saying, to litigate that.
Carissa?
Flip side, if a group has gotten their rights and their rights have required them to put it in the program, and you notice that, there's like an entire page of like music rights, please go ahead and acknowledge the work that went into obtaining those rights. Because I sound designed a show, and I went to the producer and I'm like, okay, and here's all the rights that you now need to put to the program. Please, thank you.
Okay, but I also don't bother acknowledging that the producing organization has obtained rights from the publisher of the play.
You assume that happens.
Right, you assume it
The
happens.
assumption is that
We
it's
assume
happening.
that they're doing the material legal.
Because we see the legal on the cover usually.
All right. Thank you so much, panelists. I feel like this has been a lively discussion. Thank you for all asking questions, raising your hands, and participating. I appreciate y'all coming out here today. I had two action items. And Amanda, if you want to kill that for my action items here.
I'm trying. There we go.